Alright, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Tea and Fixing Bikes. So tonight, what I'm going to do, today, right now, whenever you're watching this, always start a bike repair with tea. It's the most important thing, most important process, health and safety, mindfulness, etc. What I'm going to show you to do today is how to check and see if your frame is bent. Now, if you've had a crash, you might want to know, is this frame fucked? Can I still use it? Oftentimes if you sit on it, it might feel a bit weird. It might pull a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. It might just feel a bit strange. It might feel a bit shorter, because if the frame has bent, then functionally speaking, the front and rear dropouts will probably be slightly closer either side, thus you'll probably feel it pull to the left or the right a little bit. Some places you can check for crash damage. Underneath the head tube. So this is, for those of you who don't know, not everybody knows. I don't want to come off as patronising, but not everybody knows these terms, and it's probably good for us to have a common vernacular to talk about these things. So what you've got here is you've got your down tube and you got your forks. Between there, underneath here, this little crevice, if you've had a crash, or if you're checking a second-hand bike to see if it's got crash damage, you might find rippling of the paint. This sometimes hard to tell if the angle between the fork and the down tube is right. If you don't know what the bike looks like new, it might just have a really steep head tube. I mean, obviously, if it's like, then you know it's fucked. But if it's a little bit fucked, it's sometimes hard to tell. So you can check under there, check for paint rippling around the back. Check that when you spin the bars, if the headset wants to stop right in the middle, it's not as easy to tell if it's kind of a newer bike because it'll have sealed cartridge bearings. But if it's kind of an older steel frame, what you might notice is it might want to lock near the front, which is quite often symptomatic. If it's notchy the whole way around, it's just gritty headset. But if it's smooth and then it kind of gets stuck at the front, quite often it's a sign it's been in a head-on crash and that the cup has been dented because one of the bearings has impacted the cup so hard at that crash point that you've now got essentially a little notch in the cup. So once you've checked those things, check underneath there. That's always a good one. Check the headset moves freely. Good thing to do if you're buying a second-hand bike anyway. It's then good to check and see if the frame's bent. So a very simple way you can do this: take a straight thing, a ruler, a piece of string is really good, but I couldn't find any pieces of string. And I always like my videos to be accessible. I like people to not feel as though they need 1,000,001 fucking fancy tools to be able to check something out. I do have this tape measure, which I'm going to use to demonstrate. It's a bit difficult to do this by yourself, but I'm going to demonstrate what you need to do. So what you have to do is take your straight thing and put it on 2 point. Now sometimes some frames are a bit weird, they might be a bit asymmetrical on either side, and then it's a bit difficult to tell. But what you want to do is put it on one side of the frame at a time, 2 known points that are the same on either side. So I'm going to put it just here, just above the dropout, right there, and I'm going to put it here, just on the seam of that weld, right up at the top tube. So I know there's the same point on either side. And importantly, this isn't bumping onto anything on the way. Obviously, if it's doing this, it's not a fucking straight line. You need a straight line. So you want it from that side there, up to that weld, up to that same point. I'm going to go to the stripe, because the stripe's probably fairly uniform. The stripe and the paint just there. What you then do is you get your friend, your trusted mate, to measure from the middle of the seat tube to the string. So let's say I've got my string about here, and let's say typically the gap will be somewhere between 40 and 60 millimeters, depending on the style of bike. Mountain bikes it's going to be wider because the distance between the seat tube and the dropouts is simply wider because of the bigger tires. But on a road bike it's typically between 40 and 50 millimeters. The raw number isn't as important. What is important is the difference. Anything less than 5 mil is within tolerance, is deemed as safe. That's just fairly standard. I'm sure some people might have tighter standards, or some factories, some very high-end manufacturers will have tighter standards. But in general, if you put your string on this side, measure the gap, and it's important to do it from the same point. So you can measure from the center of the bottle cage bolt to where the line is sitting on this side, then do the same on the other side. You want the two numbers to be less than 5 mil apart. So if it's 40 on one side and 47 on the other side, then you know the frame's fucking cooked. It's for the bin. It's probably not going to ride very well. So a good thing to do as well, if you're picking up a second hand frame, measure it before you go to the effort of putting all the parts on, and then you maybe go put the wheel in and the gears aren't quite working quite well, or it maybe sits out to the left a little bit and you're like, oh, the brake doesn't quite run right. Maybe it's because your frame's bent. So it's worthwhile checking this before you go putting in a massive amount of effort to get the bike ready to rumble. And there you go. Quick wee video on how to check a bike for crash damage. See you in the next one. Ride safe.